Hello again, everybody, and welcome back to my channel. I'm so excited to have you guys back again today. If you notice a little lack of plants behind me, fear not. I have not had a mass outbreak. Things have not died on me. It is the very first sunny day that we have had in probably about a week, maybe almost 2 weeks. And so I've moved a bunch of my plants into the windowsills to try to soak up as much of that sun as they possibly can. So don't worry, these plants are not permanently missing from my collection. They are just in a sunny spot, absorbing some of that sunlight. Before I hop into today's video, take a moment, hit that like button, remember to subscribe and hit that notification bell. And without further ado, let's get into today's video. A lot of you probably know that I have been playing around with semi-hydroponics for probably about 2 months now, converting a couple of plants, propagating a couple of plants in that leca, and really actually enjoying it, having some really great success with those plants that I either started propagating in the leca or that I've converted over. So I recently got a new plant from Home Depot, and I thought today I would take you guys along that journey with me in converting it over to semi-hydroponics. So the plant that I'm going to be converting up is the variegated prayer plant. So you can see all that beautiful variegation on here. I found this at Home Depot and I was super excited. I actually ended up getting 2 plants. They were just under $5 a piece. So I thought I could put 2 together, make a little bit bigger plant. If you notice that the leaves are a little bit wilty, that is because I have not watered it. I probably should have done this yesterday. I do find that the soil comes off the roots a little bit easier if it's dry. And so I really should have probably converted it yesterday, but I had so many things to do. So if it looks a little wilty, it's because it is dry. It does need to be watered, but hopefully it will be getting a lot of that water as I convert it over to the semi-hydroponics. So a couple of reasons that I've converted some of these plants over to semi-hydroponics and some things I've really enjoyed about it so far. I do find that since I'm in a dry climate, some of these plants that really enjoy a little bit more moisture, they do really, really well for me in the semi-hydroponics. Some of the plants that are doing extraordinarily well would be my orchids, a few of my Hoyas, most of my Hoyas actually that I either started or propagated in leca are really enjoying that environment, as well as most of my pothos and other trailing plants like that. When I do my home tour, I'll take you around, I'll point out what's in semi-hydro, how is it going for me? Does it enjoy it? Does it not? But so far I've had mostly good success, especially with healthy plants that I've converted over. A little bit more mixed success if I'm trying to rehab a plant a little bit. It might still be recovering, but I think those are starting to turn the corner and actually improve. So some of the things that I really enjoy about semi-hydroponics is just the ease of care for my particular lifestyle. I'm a teacher, I'm busy, I have lots of extracurricular activities that I'm doing, and sometimes it's a little bit difficult to stay on top of the watering schedule, especially if I'm having to go around and check if the plant needs more water, taking it over to the sink, letting it all drain through, bringing it back to its pot. All of that stuff has been a little bit overwhelming, and there are a few plants that I've noticed that have suffered because I'm not staying quite on that watering schedule that they might like. The thing I like about semi-hydroponics is that I can just glance into the pot and see if it needs more water. If that water level is getting sort of low, I can top it up with a little bit of water, and that will often hold me over for a week or 2 until I can get around to changing out the water completely, refreshing the nutrients, all of that kind of stuff. As far as doing a complete flush and replacing the nutrients, I probably get to that every 3 weeks or so. If I notice a plant is really starting to build up some of that mineral deposits on the leca, I might do it a little bit sooner. But for the most part, I've noticed that my plants can go about 3 weeks without having to be flushed and replenished with those nutrients. So the ease of care is definitely a strong one for me. I've also noticed a little bit less as far as the pests go. Now it is winter time and the pest population is naturally going to deplete a little bit here in the winter time. But I have noticed that those plants tend to not have anything at all, no fungus gnats, no nothing. And so I'll be curious to keep an eye on that through the spring and summer and see if that holds true for me in the warmer months. One other thing that I've noticed about the plants that are doing well in the semi-hydroponics is they are doing extremely well in the semi-hydroponics. I have an orchid that was a rescue from Walmart. It was drowning at Walmart. It is currently in bud and putting on some flowers. Hopefully that'll be in flower here in the next week or so. I have a couple pothos that have just put on crazy amounts of growth since they've been converted over to the semi-hydroponics. And my Hoyas, I've noticed, and actually all my variegated plants, I've noticed, have put on a little extra variegation in the semi-hydroponics. If you'd like me to experiment with that and take a cutting from a couple plants and see if that actually, the amount of nutrients and that semi-hydro is in fact influencing the variegation and the modeling and the speckling on my plants, let me know. I'll be happy to do that. Maybe that would be a good one to do over the summertime in the warmer months and kind of see if that actually is affecting how much variegation I'm getting out of my plants. So I think I've rambled on long enough. I've got plenty to do with converting these plants over to semi-hydro. So I'm going to take you over to my kitchen and we will work on converting these plants from the soil that they're in over into the leca. Okay, hi, welcome to my kitchen. I'm sorry if it feels a little bit like a weird angle, just the way my counters are and kind of where my sink sits. It's a little bit of a weird angle and I can't really get everything in the shot without moving you way far back. So I will try to show you everything as I'm working through it. So to start out with, the things that you are going to need to convert your plant over to semi-hydroponics are going to be some leca. I've let this soak overnight, especially because I have already used this. This came from another plant that did not survive the leca journey. And so this is pre-used leca, which is really wonderful that I can go ahead and rinse it and reuse it, but I've let it sit overnight in that water. You will need a strainer of some sort to go ahead and rinse that leca a little bit further. You're going to need some sort of a pot that has lots of holes in it. They do have special made kind of mesh pots that you can use to convert things over to semi-hydroponics. I just save all my nursery pots, especially the ones that have lots of holes in the bottom. They're perfect, they're tailor-made for that. And then also you will need a cover pot for all of your nutrients to sit in, and this needs to not have drainage holes. It needs to be able to hold water. So maybe test it. This one has one of those little removable rubber things in it. I've tested it. It holds water. It's not going to leak. So I am confident in using this to hold my nutrients. You will also need some semi-hydroponics nutrients. This is the Flora Nova Gro. I really like this. It's a little bit pricey, but it has all the nutrients all in one. You can also buy the individual bottles of the different nutrients and put those together and combine them as you like. I just like the ease of being able to put a couple drops of this in and call it a day. I also use my old trusty standby, my Super Thrive. I add a couple drops of that to every single batch of nutrients that I make up. And then something that I didn't use for those first couple experiments, but I'm now incorporating into my semi-hydro routine, is the pH down and the pH up. This particular kit also comes with a little tester bottle so that you can test what the pH of your water is. It's a little bit more important in semi-hydro than it is with houseplants in general, but I am discovering that my houseplants that I haven't really been paying attention to that are not in this semi-hydroponics actually really tend to enjoy having a little bit more of a pH balanced water, and I'll talk about that in a little bit. I also, of course, have my plant, which I have gone ahead and removed the majority of the soil from. Like I said, I like to do it dry. I find that I get more of that soil off in that initial kind of shakedown if the roots and the soil are completely dry. So I'm going to go ahead and rinse these off a little bit further here in my sink, trying to get them as clean as I possibly can. Now, I'm not going to worry about them being perfectly clean. If I worried about that, I'd be here all day. So I'm going to just worry about getting off as much as I possibly can here at my sink. I do have one of these little hoses, little sprayers, which I find works really, really well. If I set it to the right pressure, I can get most of that dirt off. So I'm going to go ahead and do that right now. All right, so I've gone ahead and rinsed off these roots pretty well. You can see there might be a little bit of dirt still clinging there, but for the most part, they are pretty well cleaned off. I also went ahead and rinsed off the leaves. Since this is a new plant to my home, I went ahead and sprayed them with neem oil, kept them a little bit separate from my other plants for a couple of days, rinsed off the leaves when I first came home, but since I had them here over my sink anyway, I thought I would go ahead and give the leaves one more rinse just to make sure there's no pests or any disease left on those leaves. Another important thing to note is if you're not able to get a significant amount of that dirt off, or if it's a fairly chunky mix, things like that, you might want to put some sort of a strainer or a catcher in your sink so that you're not ruining your sink by washing a significant amount of dirt and rocks and bark and things like that down your sink. So just something to be aware of. So now that I have these roots all cleaned off, I'm going to set the plant over to the side and work with the leca a little bit. So the next thing I'm going to do is take this strainer and this leca that's been sitting for a while. I'll go ahead and pour that into the strainer. So I do like to work in a little bit smaller batches with the leca just so that I have a little bit more surface area available to me. I can get any sort of debris or anything off of them. If it's new leca, you definitely want to soak and rinse it because there might be some dust from transportation that just kind of naturally falls off the leca. You want to soak or rinse it so that all those little capillaries are completely free and can soak up the water and the nutrients up to your plant. So again, I'm going to take my sink, my little hose, and I'm going to just rinse these off the best I can. This particular batch has some little pieces of roots and things left on it, so I'm going to go ahead and rinse them off the best I can. All right, so I've gone ahead and rinsed out all that leca. Again, I'm not worried about being perfect, just like with the roots. One of the really nice things about leca is that things kind of wash through and drain as you do that kind of rinse and then re-nutrient your semi-hydro plants. You're rinsing out some of that debris and things as it's kind of naturally coming off. So I'm not worried about perfection because I know I can always go back and adjust and fix and clean a little bit more if I need to, much more easily than I can with planting in soil. So I have my little pot that the actual plant is going to sit in, and I will take it and I will fill it up depending on the size of the plant. If I'm going to look at these roots here, I think I'm probably going to go ahead and fill that up somewhere about 1/3 of the way for that kind of initial base layer of leca. All right, so that's filled up maybe to about here with the leca. Now I'm going to go ahead and take the plant and set it in there and arrange it the way that I want. I'll try to do that here on the counter so that you guys can see what's going on. So this plant is really, really nice. It's got everything kind of bunched together in one group. Some of the plants that I found a little more challenging are some of those big store-bought vining plants where they have 101 little starts planted in it, and taking each of those little tiny rooted cuttings and trying to plant them in leca and get them to stay where you want them to can be a little bit of a challenge. It's doable, it just takes a little more time. Something like this, where everything's pretty much reasonably together, I can just arrange it how I'd like and set it in the middle and pour the leca around it. All right, so that seems like a pretty decent arrangement. Everything's pretty solid here in the middle. Now I'm going to fill it up a little bit more with the leca. All right, so that's filled up maybe 2/3 of the way. One of the other really nice things about leca is everything is really easy to kind of take out, rearrange. So I'm going to glance at this now that's a little bit more settled. Settle some of that leca down so that all the little crevices get filled the best they can. Rearrange it and then top up almost to the very top with the remainder of the leca. All right, so now that I've kind of got it where I want it, I'm just going to give it a little tap so all that leca settles down. You really want to make sure everything is really pushed down so that it's in the leca. One of the biggest problems that I've had, again, typically with those vining plants where there's lots of small cuttings, is that some of those little cuttings tend to not get pushed down into the leca far enough. They're not getting the water and the nutrients they need. They die off. It's not the end of the world, especially if you've got a big full plant. One little vine here and there dying off is not going to be the end of the world, but it's just something to keep in mind as you're placing everything into the pot. All right, so there we have it, the finished potted up variegated Maranta. it might look a little bit droopy. That's another one of those things that I have noticed about the plants, especially ones that have a tendency to wilt or droop. They might look a little bit wilty and droopy for the first couple of days, and then they start to perk up as they're adjusting to being in the semi-hydroponics. If you're a little bit curious about that whole conversion process, what the first couple of days or even the first couple of weeks of a plant being in semi-hydro looks like, you can always pop over to my Instagram. If you would like me to make a dedicated video, it might take a little while to make, as I would be filming it over the course of a few weeks or a month or even a couple of months, but I'd be happy to kind of give you an update on what plants look like as they're going through that conversion process. So now I take the plant that's in its little nursery pot and I'm going to go ahead and pot it up in my cover pot. This particular pot I actually ended up finding on Amazon. I like the aesthetic of it. I like the way that it has the option to convert drainage hole or not drainage hole. I'll make sure that I link to it down below. So I'm going to take my pot and my little Maranta and place that in there. I really enjoy having a pot. That is actually a decent amount bigger than my nursery pot, probably about a finger's width or so that I can easily look down in there and see what the water level is like without having to take the pot out and put it back in. Again, just kind of a personal preference, a little bit of ease for me. All right, so I'm gonna set this thing over to the side and we will work on mixing up our nutrients. All right, so one other thing that you will need, or a couple of things, are some empty milk cartons or some sort of container that you can mix things up in. I like the half-gallon size. It's just convenient. I might have to mix a couple batches if I'm redoing all of my plants, but I'm not left with a ton sitting around. It will sit for a few days or even a week, and it will be perfectly fine. I just don't like having it sitting around my house. I prefer to mix it up fresh when I'm going to go ahead and re-nutrient my plants. I also have a second jug that I'm using to put filtered water in, and then I pH balance it. So this I do actually have sitting around my house, and as I need to water some of my plants, I actually have a supply. If it's sitting for a significant amount of time, you might want to just check. The pH can change based on what's already in the jug, things like that. But I do find that having that sitting around is extremely helpful for me. So I'm going to go ahead and fill this almost all the way up to the top with some nice fresh filtered water, and I will be right back. So I already know from having done this a couple times what the pH level of my water here in my house is, but just for demonstration purposes, I'm going to go ahead and show you how you would use this kit, how you can adjust the pH level. And just be aware, if you're using tap water or filtered water or distilled water, all of those might vary, so don't ever count on it being the same, even within your own household. But typically, tap water is going to be about the same level. Filtered water is always going to be about the same level. So you can kind of start to get an idea where you're going to start from depending on which type of water you're using. All right, so you take a little bit of water, you fill it up about half or 3/4 of the way. You're going to take your little pH test kit, and you're going to add 3 or 4 drops to this little amount of water. So it goes in green. I'm going to give it a little stir. And you can see it still has actually stayed pretty dark green, which I can use the bottle to tell it's almost borderline blue-green, which tells me that I'm sitting somewhere around a pH of 8. Maybe even a little bit higher than that. So it's very, very basic water. I know that I need to bring the pH down. Most houseplants prefer about a pH of 6. Always do research on your particular houseplants and figure out what they like. I certainly might do some experimentation here in my house and figure out, do my Hoyas prefer one? Do my Monsteras prefer something else? But just as a general rule of thumb, you can go to about a 6. All right, again, to kind of show you how it all works, I am going to take a little dropper and my pH down because I'm trying to bring the pH down in this particular water. I'm going to add a couple drops. And you can see I've brought it down quite a bit. It's turned red, which actually brings it all the way down towards acidic, towards a red. Now, if I was actually going to use this water for something, I might want to use the pH up to bring a little bit more of that pH back towards a 6. I do like to bring it somewhere a little bit maybe like between a 5 and a 6, so kind of an orangey yellow, just because I know that the plant will kind of mess with the basicness and the pH of the water once I water the plant. But just to kind of demonstrate how that all works and give you guys an idea. So since the nutrients can actually affect the pH of the water, I'm going to go ahead and add the nutrients that I want first into the water. Then I will go ahead and test it and see if I can figure out what the pH is and if I need to adjust it at all. So the first one that I'm going to use is my Flora Nova Gro. I'm going to give it a little shake. I always do this over the sink or outside, just in case. You can tell it's not exactly the cleanest thing to be using, so I'll give it a little shake. And then according to the directions here on the back, it tells me to use about a half a teaspoon per gallon. So I'm going to go ahead and use my little dropper to get about a quarter of a teaspoon into this whole jug of water. All right, so I've added a little bit of that to the jug. Next, I'm going to add my Super Thrive. Again, it's telling me to use 4 tablespoons per gallon of water. I don't like to use quite that much. I actually end up just doing a few drops per half gallon, just enough that it's giving it a little extra boost. All right, and put the lid back on your gallon of water and give it a little shake. Okay, so now I'm going to take this little batch of water, do a little test from it, and see if I can adjust the pH down to where I need it to be. All right, so you can see that actually adding all the nutrients took that really basic water and actually made it kind of acidic. So I'm going to go ahead and take some of that pH up and bring it back up to a little bit more of an orangey color rather than this kind of deep red color. And I always start just a couple drops at a time. This stuff is really strong. So maybe 2 or 3 drops just to see where that's going to bring us. All right, so just about 2 or 3 drops actually went ahead and brought me up to this kind of yellow color. It's a little bit dull just because there are some of the colors of the nutrients in there, but you can see that's probably about where I want my pH of my water to be. All right, so now all the hard part is done. Now all I'm going to do is take this nutrient mix that I have created. I'm going to pour it into this pot. And I fill it up about 1/3 of the way. It really depends on the depth of your pot, how deep your roots are going in your leca. You want the very, very bottom roots to go ahead and maybe be in a little bit of that nutrient mixture. But for the most part, most of the roots are actually getting their water and nutrients from the leca itself and that wicking action more so than actual direct contact with the water. This is also really nice if you need to tell somebody else how to water your plants. It's super easy to just tell them, take this mixture that I've already mixed up for you, pour it in the plants till the pot is about 1/3 of the way full, and they're set to go. There's no risk of over or under watering while you're gone. So that is it. That's how I convert my plants over to semi-hydroponics. A little bit of extra work here up front, more than just bringing them into your home. But overall, over the long run, I find that it's less work, less maintenance, and my plants tend to do really, really well in the semi-hydroponics. Thank you guys so much for joining me for today's video. If you found this content useful, don't forget to leave a thumbs up, maybe leave a comment down in the comments below, and let me know what you thought of today's video if you'd like to see more in my semi-hydroponics adventure. And I will see you guys very soon with another video. Bye.